Welcome back to Decluttering the Strategic Space. In this episode, we dive into one of the most complex and consequential relationships in Asia, that is, of India and China. 5 years after the Galwan clash, we remain locked in a cycle of distrust, competition, and uneasy coexistence. Borders are tense, but trade is booming, and the rivalry is spilling into the Indian Ocean. So, is 2025 shaping to be the year of stalemate, or could there be a breakthrough? To explore this, we look at the various issues related to our relationship, that is, the border, the economic issues, the naval competition, and the global chessboard that defines the India China equation. As in every episode, I have with me my friend and colleague, Commodore Venu Gopal. Welcome, Venu.
Thank you, Kapil.
So I'll just start, Venu. My first question: how have India-China relations evolved since the Galwan clash of 2020?
See, Kapil, before I answer your question, I will go briefly into the history. Both India and China have been significant powers in the region, and both are striving towards being global powers. China is a bit ahead. Because of these reasons, geographic proximity and the rising profile of both these countries have resulted in a kind of a complicated relationship between the two. The India-China diplomatic relationship started in 1950. The diplomatic and economic influence increased during the period after 2008. Although there were four military conflicts, the Sino-Indian War of 1962, the border clashes, Natula and Chole in 1967, Sandrang in 1987, and Galwan in 2020. Till Galwan, India has been balancing the relation between with China in a way that being a little subdued in our effort and balancing a bigger player in the region by our own tact and diplomacy. But after the 2020, the confrontational dynamics emerged in the region, which made a paradigm shift in India's stand. India started balancing China with multilateral engagement in forums like RIC, BRICS, SCO, and also increased our engagement and partnership, or rather a strategic partnership in Indo-Pacific region.
So, would it be wrong to say that while we make efforts to improve our relations and trade continues to boom, we remain deeply suspicious of China?
See, it has been a cautious working to de-escalate tensions.
Yeah.
And a significant progress has been made, I would say, although which has resulted in reduction in military tensions. However, the crux issue of the border
Continues to remain.
remains unsolved. Certain CBMs are in place now with a lot of high-level interaction, right from the heads of state onwards to the decision-making levels in both the governments. Then there's a likelihood of commencement of direct flights between the two countries. More of increasing the trade is also being thought of. Notwithstanding these CBMs, the political stalemate continues because India's stand has been basically peace and tranquility in the border is a precursor to restoring other aspects of relationship.
Yeah.
I would, surmise by saying that cautiously optimum relationship is what is ahead, and a potential detente can be assumed. However, chances of a new chapter in strategic partnership on the horizon is, at the moment, looks like I would say there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Do you see the current situation as a stable stalemate or a fragile pause before the next crisis? Do you think the recent meeting between Xi Jinping and PM Modi has changed the scenario?
See, as an optimist, I will see the glass as half full. Okay. And I would say the recent meeting between the External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar and Wang Yi, the Foreign Minister of China, has focused or rather built a framework, a comprehensive framework for engagement, which rests on three pillars: mutual respect, sensitivity, and interest. Despite all this, I would say that there are several irritants which continue to challenge the steps taken. Most important being territorial disputes, trade imbalances, strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific region, differing approach to regional connectivity projects like the Chinese BRI projects.
Yeah, right.
And most complex out of this remains the border disputes. And to complement or to supplement these irritants, there are two other issues which is in the background. One is the close China-Pakistan all-weather relationship. And number two is the covert support of Chinese in fueling insurgency in Northeast. Does the India-China still find a common ground in platforms like BRICS and SCO?
The kind of relationship that we have in BRICS and SCO, the kind of discussions that are taking place today, they have changed. So nature of cooperation has changed. So in BRICS, for example, India and China align on reforming global financial institutions. We are calling for a multipolar world. We are resisting Western dominance. Similarly, in the SCO meetings, we are both pushing on anti terror cooperation, amongst other things. But these platforms have also become arenas of competition. For example, China uses SCO to promote its BRI projects, while we don't recognize BRI projects. Similarly, in the BRICS, China has gone and supported the addition of countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and UAE, which has given China more scope to expand its influence, whilst we are a little cautious about dilution. So, yes, issue based convergence is there between us and China, but the trust deficit means these forums are more about managing coexistence rather than building real partnerships.
What are the main drivers, do you think, which shapes the bilateral dynamics from this year onwards, or rather for future?
See, basically, the bilateral dynamics in 2025 are not just trade and border issues. The larger global power struggle that is happening has become another important factor in our bilateral relations. So, firstly, the security aspect. The That is number one. We have an unresolved border. We have the Galwan clash of 2020, after which both sides have got huge troops on both sides of the border. Infrastructure upgrade is taking place at a frenetic pace, which means that there is total mistrust amongst the two countries. And so, therefore, that is the first factor which shapes the dynamics of our bilateral relations. Then we have the economic paradox. Now, trade is booming. Like you mentioned, we got $120 billion worth of trade going on. $80 billion is our deficit on our side. So there are issues in this, but trade is it's booming. Both sides are happy the way it's happening. We've got the pharma ingredients. Pharma is one of our big success stories in terms of exports. But 70% of our imports are from China for the APIs. Then we have the electronics. We have got the components coming from China. Then we have our, in solar industry, 80% of our imports are coming from China. So we can talk of self-reliance, but de-risking from China is very difficult. So that is the economic paradox. And then the larger geopolitical issue is there. That is our Beijing is uncomfortable with our relations with the United States, and this is notwithstanding the current downturn in our relations with USA.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically linked to that question, can India realistically reduce its dependence on Chinese imports in crucial sectors?
We got 70% of our APIs coming from China, and then we produce the pharma industry produces the medicines and exports it. Then we got Apple has come up in a big way. They have come up and set up factories. But 40% of our smartphone components are coming from China. Then we got 80% of solar components coming from China. So from from the Chinese perspective, India is a fast growing market. They would be happy to continue to export to India despite the political tensions that exist. But to work around, very difficult to say that we will be able to delink from China in the very near future. China took decades to set up its infrastructure, to set up its clusters, to set up logistics efficiency. With all this, it will take us time to to set up all this and be able to replace China. So I feel that diversification of our imports is more possible than decoupling from China.
That means basically what you're saying, that the trade between India and China continues notwithstanding the political
Yeah,
tensions.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so let's
Uh,
shift our focus to the domain that both of us spend our lives in. And is the Indian Ocean becoming a new frontier in India-China rivalry?
Yes, Indian Ocean has gained a lot of prominence in the last 2 decades with the Chinese, uh, you know, getting more and more engaged. They started off with their anti-piracy operations in 2007, and thereafter they increased their presence, add submarine deployment and deployment of research vessels in the region. That's one. Then uh, they were promoting their BRI and thereby investing in infrastructure building in all the countries in Indian Ocean region
Mhm.
and gaining a foothold. And it's like if you recall Admiral Mahan's the famous quote which says that the trade is followed, the navy and the trade, the relation between the two. You have investments overseas, then you have a navy to protect those investments, and from the investments you run the navy.
Yeah.
So that's a cycle which is there. So whereas India has always been considering Indian Ocean as our own backyard, now with the Chinese engagement, what is happening is that India started focusing more on the neighborhood first policy, thereby investing in infrastructure development in the countries in the Indian Ocean region. So what I basically say is that the rising influence of both the nations in Indian Ocean is leading to a contest for
Contest.
regional leadership and shifting maritime order. Also, the interaction of geography with power dynamics. You see, India is geographically well placed with respect to China, makes
Mhm.
the region a little more complex. So, if I have to sum it up, I would say that the future relationship between India and China in this shared maritime space,
Hmm.
whether through cooperation, coexistence, competition, or confrontation, will be a defining challenge for the region.
So is the PLA Navy's growing blue water capability a bigger concern than the land borders today? Is it converting towards that?
First of all, look at what's a blue water navy. It's a naval force which is capable of operating independently, exercising global sea control or global sea control, or I would say power projection in its area of interest.
Mhm.
It could consist of carriers, large combatants, submarines, and replenishment ships, etc. China's that way numerically their navy is growing in numbers, right? But the most important thing that we need to see is that the line of communication between the closest Chinese base
And the Indian Ocean.
to the Malacca Straits of the Yulian. From Yulian base, it's about 5,000 nautical miles if the ships had to come to the Indian Ocean. So
Yeah.
the line of communication is very long. Sustaining large combatants in an out of area region requires a full logistics support, overseas bases, and even air power support from shore. All these three at the moment Chinese are lacking. One would say that there's a base which is there in Djibouti. Incidentally, Chinese call the base in Djibouti as a support facility. They don't call it as a military base. But that base in Djibouti is in the Red Sea, which is far out when you compare to the Indian Ocean region.
Yeah.
So Chinese Navy, even if they are able to operate in Indian Ocean, sustained deployment is still a problem because of the factors that I already mentioned. So in my view, although Chinese Navy is expanding rapidly, it'll take a long time for it to reach a position of achieving a dominance in Indian Ocean.
Yeah, so you mentioned that firstly, the kind of units and the number of units which China is working very rapidly on. Then the next is the ports. China is also working on ports. It's already in talks with Bangladesh, with Myanmar. It's already got Hamban Tota. Then it's got Djibouti, as you mentioned, and then there is Gwadar. Of course, the air support is one issue that is going to be a very long legs for China, and that's going to be an issue. So certainly no shore based support.
Overseas bases will be a liability unless and until it has got political support from the host country.
Yeah, true.
Like you mentioned, that a base in Hambantota or a base in Chittagong in Bangladesh, these are countries who always will like to balance the relations between India and China, and hence will not allow the bases to be used for military purpose during an operation. Whereas the thing is different with Gwadar. Gwadar is completely the Chinese, rather I would say it is, politically they aligned, and it's an all-weather ally, both Pakistan and China. So China will be free to use the port of Gwadar, in a future conflict, either with India or with the United States, or I would say a projection of power in the Indian Ocean region. But till then, I will not give a lot of credibility to the overseas bases. Even when you look at the US scenario, it's a network of bases that the US operates. Basically, each base is supporting the other. Like if it's a kind of a kind of a string,
Yeah.
where mutual support is there. Like if you see from Bahrain, if you see Diego Garcia, Singapore, then you go to Guam, you got the bases in Japan and Korea. So if you look Indo-Pacific region as a whole, you will find that the the US Navy is able to operate in the region without going back to their base port in the US.
Yeah, true. But look at how smart they were. They initially, when they built Hambantota, it was a 49-year lease, and then subsequently they trapped the Sri Lankans in such a manner that they renegotiated the lease and made it a 99-year. So China is known to buy its way through, and so you never know in future how they'll be able to buy their way through in Hambantota.
See, when you go to Hambantota, it can be a dual purpose, port. That means it can provide logistic support to the Chinese Navy, which is operating during peacetime. Okay, and plus commercially, and Hambantota is doing well, about 20 to 40%, improvement in operations 2024, which says that the port is actually performing. Now, just imagine a situation where there's a, Indo-China skirmish, which is spilled over to the Indian Ocean region. Now, as per one logic, you can say that Chinese will operate their ships or submarines with forward deploy, taking Hambantota as a port. But Hambantota is just about less than half an hour flight time by fighter aircraft, the Indian Air Force. So if Sri Lanka allows China to operate from there, we are well within our right to assume that Sri Lanka is an adversary and can be targeted. So, in my view, the Chinese purpose of having a part of their BRI project investing in Hambantota may be a good idea, but definitely it is not from a operational point of view, or rather from point of view where there's a kind of a conflict in the region.
Okay. So now, tell me, how is India responding to China's expanding string of pearls strategy? You have already mentioned some things. Anything else you would like to add in this?
See, now we have gone in a big way as far as Project Sagar is concerned. That is security and growth for all in the region, with the Prime Minister himself is taking a lot of, giving a lot of focus into it. Then it is focusing on the maritime security, economic development, and regional connectivity. Then India also is part of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, BIMSTEC. All these basically these organizations work on the principles of core pillars of India's engagement in the region, that is maritime security, economic cooperation, and disaster response. These are the main things. Okay. Now, India also conducts regular exercises with the countries in the region, naval exercises too, to improve interoperability. And we have also invested in the Sitwe port in Myanmar, Sitwe. Colombo, we've invested. Hambantota, we've invested. In an airstrip and jetty in the Agalaga Island, we've invested. Then Hambantota International Airport, we've invested. So basically, I would say, in a subtle counter to the Chinese investments, we are also carrying out, or rather, we are doing our homework and we're investing in the region.
Could we see a future flashpoint in the Indian Ocean? Or is this more about long term strategic positioning than immediate conflict?
I would say that it is more of a strategic deterrence. Having a navy, powerful navy to operate. But at the moment, the powerful navy, if I see today, is a kind of a navy, Chinese navy, which can operate with impunity in South China Sea. That's one. Probably in the nearby, Pacific region. Whereas when they come out to the Indian Ocean, the line of communication is too far to manage.
Yeah.
Even if they operate either through the Malacca Strait or the Sunda or the Lombok, the distances are too long. In the absence of any overseas base, it'll be very difficult for China to operate in the Indian Ocean after coming out to the straits into the region of our interest. Now, okay, in South Asia, where do India and China compete most intensely? Nepal, Sri Lanka, or Bangladesh?
See, we got three neighbors: Nepal, we got Sri Lanka, we got Bangladesh, and we got competition in all these countries. In Nepal, the competition is more political and geography wise. The recent clashes and protests in Kathmandu highlighted how unstable the political landscape is. China has been quick to back the leftists and the nationalist factions, and it uses its BRI in a big way in Nepal. It's developing roads, hydropower, is developing rail links into Tibet, etc. India, of course, has unmatched cultural and people to people ties. We have got open borders with them, but instability creates openings for Beijing. For Delhi, an unstable Nepal is a direct security concern because of the borders and the impact on the sensitive Himalayan region. So that's as far as Nepal is concerned. Bangladesh is more of an economic issue. The big shift as in the regime change that took place under Sheikh Hasina, we had a strong alignment, and we could afford to develop connectivity for our northeastern states, and there was security cooperation. Now the new leadership looks at it's more trying more to hedge India and China to benefit itself. So they are being smart. So China is already Dhaka's biggest trading partner and defense supplier. Now it has become a defense supplier as well. So while India is trying to secure transit routes, so Bangladesh has become much more of a contested space than before after the Sheikh Hasina has been the regime has been changed. In Sri Lanka, that's our sharpest differences between India and China exist in Sri Lanka. China's investments, we talked about Hambantota, Colombo Port City. It's huge investment in Colombo Port City. It's given its strategic depth during the Rajapaksa years. Then happened the economic collapse. During the economic collapse, uh, at least the Sri Lankan government, they appreciated India's the fact that we extended $4 billion at real cheap rates, while China only indulged in renegotiating its loans to Sri Lanka. So India was seen as a better friend.
Now, we've seen all the factors considered. Now, if you look at it, what are we presently at? A stalemate or a breakthrough? So, in my view, I think that it's a breakthrough which has to be viewed through a cautious optimism. There's definitely a thorn relationship if you see the glasses half full, considering the kind of the series of engagements taking place at all levels, from Prime Minister to National Security Advisor to the External Affairs Minister, agreement on the patrolling arrangement, and even Wang Yi mentioning that the dragon is dancing with the elephant now. So the critical issues remain unsolved, that is the border issues, and which is linked to maintaining peace and tranquility in the border, which is linked to the remaining part of the relations between the two countries. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would like to differ here a bit. I feel that nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. The amount of mistrust that is there is, very high. We have lots of unresolved border issues, and there are competing ambitions between the two. And United States is not going to allow us to close to China. So while we may have issue-based cooperation in various issues, especially trade, but our overall relationship, I think, will remain stuck. So that's
Kapil,
what.
remember what Armstrong said when he landed on the moon?
Sorry.
Remember what Neil Armstrong said,
Hmm.
when he landed on the moon.
Okay, so time will tell.
First step, and it is a giant step for the mankind.
Yeah.
Similarly, we have taken the first step, and we will probably work on it, because diplomacy is something which is not rigid as, I mean, rather, international relations is not rigid as such, because countries are working for their own national interests. So at a time when China is also, striving to be a global power, China also will not like to have a kind of a challenger in the region as such. So probably as a Chinese politician, I might think that, hold India, probably a cooperation, a cautious approach to future, or instead of going into any confrontation.
So let's see. You have a view, I have a view, and I feel that we are very clear that unless the border issues are resolved, we will not cooperate other than in trade. So that's one stand that India has been taking. Then the seas are emerging as the next frontier, and breakthroughs are not impossible, like you say, but the balance probability is managed. Stalemate is where I would put it. So to conclude, that's the I would say that. Let us hope, as you say, there is always in diplomacy, but I feel that US is going to make sure that we remain in their quarter rather than in this quarter. So that's it for this episode of Decluttering the Strategic Space. Thank you for joining us. And if you liked this edition of our podcast, do like, share, subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned as we continue to unpack the big questions that are shaping the world. Until then, stay curious. Jai Hind.